Outpost 9 sat on the edge of nowhere. It was a small mining colony built into the red dust of a forgotten world, far from the main trade routes and even farther from anything that could be called civilization. The days were long, hot, and quiet. The wind carried fine sand that never stopped blowing, painting everything in the same dull color of rust and age. Most people here were miners or haulers, tired souls who just wanted to earn enough to leave. But one man stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Ethan Cole worked alone in the old maintenance bay. He was a human mechanic, one of the best on the outpost. His hands were rough, his face lined with years of silence, and his eyes carried a kind of sadness that never faded. Every day he repaired broken cargo ships, patched up atmospheric drones, and kept the generators alive. He spoke little, only when needed, and most of the other workers gave him space. They knew his story, or at least parts of it. Once, long ago, Ethan had been married to an alien woman named Liara. She was from the Valari, a proud and beautiful species who once ruled half the stars. The war between humans and the Valari had torn them apart. Everyone said Liara had died during the fighting. Ethan never believed it, but after years of waiting and searching, hope had slowly faded into silence. The storm started just before dusk. The sky turned dark orange, and the air began to hum with static. Ethan checked the seals on his workshop, making sure nothing would blow loose. He was just about to power down for the night when a soft alarm sounded from the comms panel. It was an incoming transmission, weak, broken, barely holding together through the static. He frowned and turned up the volume. The voice was faint, full of static and fear. "Mayday. This is Shuttle Astra 3. Engines failing. Requesting any assistance. Coordinates." The message cut out. Ethan stared at the screen, watching as the coordinates flickered across the display. The location wasn't far, just a few miles out into the storm. He thought about ignoring it. Ships went down all the time out here. The colony patrol would handle it when the weather cleared. But something in the tone of that voice made him pause. There was something familiar, though he couldn't say why. He grabbed his coat, sealed his helmet, and powered up his rover. The wind was already howling outside, tearing at the ground with sharp gusts. He drove into the storm, his headlights cutting thin beams through the red haze. The desert was empty, endless, a sea of dust and broken rocks. His hands gripped the steering controls tightly as he followed the faint distress beacon on his display. After nearly an hour, he saw it. A small shuttle, half buried in sand, smoke rising from one of its engines. The hull was dented and cracked, but it hadn't exploded. Ethan parked a few meters away and fought his way through the storm toward the hatch. The wind pulled at his jacket and filled his boots with dust. He pressed his hand against the door and felt a faint vibration. Life support was still running. Someone might still be alive inside. He forced the door open, coughing as smoke poured out. The lights flickered weakly in the cabin. Two small figures lay on the floor near the cockpit. For a moment, he thought they were both children, their bodies small and fragile. He knelt beside them, checking for breathing. They were alive, though unconscious, but something about them made him freeze. Their skin had a faint shimmer, almost like it caught the light differently, the way Liara's had. Their ears were slightly pointed. Their eyes, even closed, had that soft glow of violet beneath the lids. Ethan felt his heart begin to pound. Couldn't be. He looked closer and saw a symbol burned into the side of the shuttle, a Valari emblem. He checked the ship's log, trying to pull up any record of the passengers, but most of the data was corrupted. The only readable note was a short entry under the ship's name. Astra 3, emergency evacuation. Priority high. Protect the children. His throat tightened as he read it. The handwriting on the digital note was in both human and Valari script. It looked familiar, too familiar. Ethan looked at the two small faces again. They couldn't be more than 8 years old. He brushed dust from one child's cheek, and the girl stirred slightly, whispering in a weak, tired voice. The word she said stopped his breath. "Daddy." For a long time, Ethan didn't move. The storm screamed around the shuttle, shaking the metal walls, but he didn't hear it. He could only look at the children lying before him, his mind spinning. Could it be true? Could Liara have survived long enough to send these children here? And if so, why now? He gathered the two in his arms, carrying them back to the rover. Their skin was cold, their breaths shallow. He wrapped them in blankets and started the drive back through the storm. His heart felt heavier and faster with every mile. For years he had lived in silence, fixing machines, trying to forget. But now, sitting beside two children who had just called him by a name he hadn't heard in so long, Ethan Cole knew his life had just changed forever. Ethan drove through the storm with the rover shaking under the heavy wind. The red dust kept slamming against the glass, and he could barely see the path ahead. Every few seconds, he glanced at the two small children lying in the back seat, wrapped in old thermal blankets. The boy's hand twitched now and then, but the girl stayed still, her breathing soft and slow. The sight of them filled Ethan with a strange mix of fear and hope. They looked too much like Liara to be a coincidence. When he finally reached Outpost 9, the storm had started to calm. The settlement's lights glowed weakly through the haze. Ethan parked behind his workshop, making sure no one saw him. He carried the children inside, shutting the heavy door behind him and locking it tight. The silence of the room felt different now, warmer, almost alive. He laid them down on the old cot in the corner and checked their vitals again. Both were stable but weak. They must have been out there for hours before he found them. Ethan started cleaning them up, brushing sand from their hair and faces. The boy's skin shimmered faintly when the light touched it, and his hair had a soft silver tone. The girl's features were gentler. Her eyes closed tight as if she was dreaming of something far away. Ethan sat beside them, his thoughts heavy. He had lived alone for 5 years, always wondering what had really happened to Liara. He remembered her laughter, the way she used to tease him when he struggled with Valari technology. He remembered the promise she made before leaving for that final mission, that she would come back. But she never did. As he sat there lost in thought, a faint sound broke the silence. The girl stirred again, whispering softly. Ethan leaned closer, and her eyes slowly opened. They were bright violet, the same color as Liara's. The sight hit him like a wave. The girl blinked, confused, looking around the dim room before her gaze settled on Ethan. "Daddy?" she said again, her voice weak but certain. Ethan froze. He didn't know what to say. The word sounded strange, almost painful. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Before he could speak, the boy moved as well, sitting up slightly. His eyes opened too, silver gray with a faint glow. He looked at Ethan with curiosity and something like recognition. "Where's Mom?" the boy asked quietly. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You know your mother?" The boy nodded slowly. "She told us to find you. She said you would protect us." Ethan sat down beside them. His hands shook slightly. "Your mother, Liara? She's alive." The girl frowned, as if trying to remember. "She was hurt," she whispered. "There was fire. She put us in the small ship. She said go to the blue world and find Daddy." Ethan's throat felt dry. The blue world, that was what the Valari called Earth. It meant Liara had sent them here on purpose. "You came from her ship?" he asked. The boy nodded. "We were running from bad people. They wanted us." Ethan's mind raced. It sounded like Valari agents or maybe smugglers. The Valari Empire had fallen after the war, but their military still had secret factions working in the shadows. If these children were half human and half Valari, they would be considered valuable or dangerous. He stood up and started pacing. "No one can know you're here," he said. "If the colony finds out, they'll take you away." The girl looked frightened. "We don't want to go." "You won't," Ethan said softly. "Not while I'm here." He spent the rest of the night caring for them, giving them water and some warm food. They ate slowly, watching him closely as if they were trying to remember something about him. The boy, Kale, said little but observed everything, while the girl, Mira, spoke in short, careful sentences. They told him that Liara had hidden them during the chaos of the last battle. She said she would find them again one day. When they finally fell asleep, Ethan sat by the small window, staring out at the fading storm. His mind was full of questions. How had Liara survived? Why had she sent their children to him after all these years? And what danger were they running from? The next morning, the colony woke up to a calm sky, but Ethan stayed inside. He avoided visitors and turned down any work requests, saying he was repairing power cells. In truth, he spent the day scanning the shuttle's remains for data. Most of it was damaged, but he managed to recover a few logs, coordinates, faint signals, and one corrupted video file. The audio was full of static, but he caught a few words in Liara's voice. Ethan, they found us. The twins, protect them. Find the gate of blue light. The message ended there. Ethan sat back in silence. His heart pounded as he stared at the frozen screen. Liara was alive. Somewhere out there, she was still fighting. And now, she had given him something far more precious than hope. She had given him a reason to fight again. As the sun set beyond the dusty horizon, Ethan looked at the sleeping children and made a silent promise. He would keep them safe. He would find Liara. Whatever it took, he would uncover the truth. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a lonely mechanic on a forgotten outpost. He was a father again. The days that followed were quiet but full of change. Ethan's workshop, once cold and silent, now echoed with the soft sounds of two children living inside. Myra's laughter, shy and uncertain at first, began to fill the air. Cale, more reserved, spent his time watching Ethan repair machines, asking careful questions about how things worked. They were curious about everything, the tools, the sounds, even the way the lights flickered when the power grid overloaded. Ethan answered as best he could, though his heart still felt heavy with questions of his own. Each night, after they fell asleep, Ethan sat by the old communication console, replaying the corrupted message again and again. Liara's voice came through in fragments, broken by static, but every word struck deep into him. He could almost see her face again, the glow of her violet eyes, the soft curve of her smile, memories of her flooded back. The way she had first appeared in his life, the day she walked into his repair bay years ago with a broken Valari transmitter and that calm, confident expression. Back then, the war had not yet started. Humans and Valari traded cautiously, always watching each other, never trusting completely. But Liara had been different. She was curious about humans, about their machines and their stubborn will to survive. Ethan had been wary of her at first, but her honesty disarmed him. She wasn't like the others. There was warmth in her voice and patience in her tone. Over time, what began as work turned into long conversations, and those conversations became something deeper. They had found peace together even when the galaxy was moving toward war. Ethan closed his eyes and remembered the night before she left. The alarms had sounded across the outpost. War had finally broken out. Liara had received an urgent message from the Valari Council. She had to return to her homeworld, to serve as a diplomat to stop the fighting. Ethan begged her not to go, but she promised she would come back. She kissed him one last time and whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll find you again." But she never did. Until now, when two children had come calling him Daddy. One morning, Ethan found Mira drawing on an old datapad with a stylus. She was sketching symbols, circles, lines, and strange runes that looked Valari. He crouched beside her and asked gently, "What are you drawing, Mira?" She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Mom used to show us these. She said they are stars." She pointed to one of the circles. "This one means home." Then she pointed to another symbol shaped like a gate. "And this one, the place we go when we are lost. The blue light." Ethan frowned slightly. "The blue light." Cale, sitting nearby, spoke quietly. "Mom said you would know what it means." Ethan stared at the symbols, his mind searching for answers. He didn't know what the gate of blue light meant, but Liara's last message had mentioned it too. Maybe it was a location, a place she wanted them to find. He decided to run a search through his old navigation charts, hoping for a clue. As the day passed, Ethan worked while the twins explored. They were full of strange habits. Sometimes Mira would hum softly, and the lights in the room would flicker as if reacting to her voice. Kale could touch the control panels and make them respond faster, even when the system was half broken. Ethan watched this in quiet awe. These children were not just hybrids, they were something new, something powerful. A blend of two worlds that were never meant to meet. That evening, he cooked them a small meal of rations and fresh bread he had traded for at the market. Mira smiled brightly, saying it tasted better than the food on the ship. Kale, however, asked a question that caught Ethan off guard. Why do humans fight so much? Ethan set down his spoon and looked at the boy. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. Kale tilted his head. Mom said fear makes people small. Ethan nodded slowly. She was right. That night, when the twins were asleep, Ethan searched through old data logs from his time during the war. He found reports of a Valari research station hidden in deep space, a place rumored to experiment on human and Valari DNA. His stomach turned as he read the fragments. Could Liara have been taken there? Was that why she disappeared? He ran more scans on the shuttle's navigation memory. Most of the logs were still damaged, but one set of coordinates appeared repeatedly. The system was labeled as uncharted, far beyond known space. Ethan copied the data into his console, staring at the faint blinking light that marked the unknown destination. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. It would take time to repair a ship capable of making that journey. He'd need fuel, supplies, and clearance to leave the outpost without drawing attention. But something inside him had already made the choice. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole had a purpose. He looked at the sleeping twins, their faces peaceful under the soft light. They were proof that Liara had survived, proof that their love had not been lost to the war. And if there was even the smallest chance she was still out there, he would find her. He turned off the lights and whispered into the quiet room. Hold on, Liara. I'm coming. Ethan spent the next few days quietly preparing for what he knew would be a dangerous journey. He told no one about his plan, not even the colony officials who sometimes stopped by his workshop to request repairs. The fewer people who knew, the safer it would be for the twins. He worked long into the nights, repairing an old scout ship that had been collecting dust for years. The hull was dented, the systems half dead, but Ethan had rebuilt worse machines before. Every time he lifted a panel or tightened a bolt, he thought about Liara, how she would have smiled at his stubbornness, how she always believed he could fix anything. Mira and Kale helped where they could. Kale had a natural gift for technology, something even Ethan couldn't fully explain. The boy could touch an inactive console and make it come alive, bypassing security codes and power failures like it was instinct. Mira, on the other hand, had a strange connection to energy. She could sense when something was wrong with the systems before any alarms sounded. Ethan watched them both with growing amazement. They were more than children. They were the bridge between two species that had once hated each other. At night, when the outpost slept, Ethan gathered supplies, food packs, oxygen tanks, and data drives. He used his remaining credits to buy extra fuel cells from a trader who didn't ask questions. By the end of the week, the ship was ready. It wasn't perfect, but it could fly. On the morning of their departure, the sky was pale gray, still carrying a thin mist of dust. Ethan loaded the last crate into the cargo hold and looked around one last time. This had been his home for years, but it had also been his cage. Now, with the twins beside him, it finally felt right to leave. Kale stood at the ramp, watching the horizon. Mira clutched a small pendant she had found among Liara's belongings, an old Valari charm shaped like a star. Are we really leaving? She asked softly. Ethan nodded. Yes, we're going to find your mother. The twins looked at each other, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Hope, fear, and determination all at once. The scout ship lifted off smoothly, breaking through the low clouds and into the black sky above. Outpost 9 grew smaller and smaller until it was just a red dot fading in the distance. Ethan set the navigation system to follow the coordinates he had recovered from the shuttle's logs, the ones Liara had left behind. The path would take them through several dead zones, places abandoned after the war. Few ships traveled that far anymore. Hours turned into days. The journey through space was long and quiet. The twins spent much of their time staring out the viewport, watching the endless stars drift by. Ethan taught them how to use the ship systems, showing Kale how to run diagnostics and Mira how to monitor power levels. They learned quickly, their minds sharp and eager. One night, as they traveled through a nebula glowing with soft blue light, Mira pointed out the window. "It looks like what Mom talked about," she whispered. "The gate of blue light." Ethan followed her gaze. The nebula was vast, its gases swirling in bright patterns of blue and silver. It was beautiful but strange, almost unnatural. The scanners picked up a faint energy signature at its center. He frowned and adjusted the sensors. There was something there, hidden behind the light. He slowed the ship and ran a deeper scan. The data came back scrambled, as if something was interfering. "That's not a natural reading," he muttered. "It's artificial. Maybe a station or a gateway." Kale leaned closer to the screen. "Mom said the gate would lead to her." Ethan looked at them both. "Then that's where we're going." He guided the ship toward the energy source. The deeper they went, the stronger the blue glow became until it filled the cockpit with a strange shimmer. The instruments began to flicker, and a low hum vibrated through the hull. Mira closed her eyes, as if listening to something beyond sound. "I can feel it," she said quietly. "It's calling us." Ethan tightened his grip on the controls. "Stay with me, Mira. Don't lose focus." Suddenly, a burst of light filled the ship, blinding them for a moment. When the glow faded, the sensors went silent. They were no longer in the nebula. Outside, the stars were different, darker, sharper. Before them floated a massive structure shaped like a ring, kilometers wide, made of black metal and glowing veins of blue energy. Pulsed like a living thing. Kale stared in awe. "Is that the gate?" Ethan nodded slowly. "It must be." As they approached, strange symbols began to appear on the ship's display, Valari markings mixed with human code. Ethan realized it wasn't just a gate. It was a fusion of both technologies. Someone had built this long after the war ended. Someone who understood both worlds. "Liara," he whispered. Before he could say anything else, alarms sounded. Several ships appeared on the scanner, small fighters with Valari transponders. They were closing fast. Kale's eyes widened. "They found us." Ethan slammed the engines to full power. "Hold on." The scout ship darted toward the ring as the fighters opened fire. Bright blue energy bolts streaked past the hull. Ethan weaved through the crossfire, his hands steady despite the chaos. Mira screamed as a bolt grazed the side of the ship, shaking it violently. Sparks burst from the console. "Almost there," Ethan shouted. The gate pulsed again, a beam of blue light opening at its center. The twins clung to their seats as Ethan drove the ship straight into it. The light swallowed them whole. For a few terrifying seconds, everything vanished. No sound, no sight, no feeling. Then, just as suddenly, the ship burst out the other side into silence. They had arrived somewhere new, somewhere unknown. Ethan looked out at the strange stars ahead and whispered, "Hold on, Liara. We're coming." The ship drifted through the strange new stars, the glow of the gate fading behind them until it disappeared completely. For a moment, everything was quiet. Ethan looked around at the unfamiliar sky. The navigation system couldn't identify their location. They were off every known chart, somewhere far beyond the borders of human and Valari space. Kale stared out the window, his voice small. "Where are we?" Ethan checked the instruments again. "I don't know, but wherever we are, it's not anywhere mapped by either side." Mira sat close to him, holding the small pendant her mother had given her. "Mom was here," she said softly. "I can feel it." Ethan wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that somehow, Liara had left a trail for them. But deep down, a darker thought began to grow. If Liara had been here, then maybe others knew about this place too. And if the Valari had chased them through the gate, it meant they weren't safe yet. He spent the next few hours running diagnostics and stabilizing the systems. The ship had taken damage from the chase. Power levels were low, and one of the engines had overheated. They'd need to land soon to make repairs. He found a small moon nearby, with a thin atmosphere and traces of old structures on the surface. It looked like a good place to hide. They descended through wisps of fog and landed near what looked like an abandoned station. The air outside was thin but breathable, so Ethan and Cale stepped out with masks while Mira stayed inside to monitor from the cockpit. The surface was silent, covered in dust and broken metal. The station had once been Valari. Its smooth architecture and curved walls made that clear, but it had been deserted for years. Cale crouched beside a broken console, running his fingers over the symbols. "This is Valari tech," he said. "But it feels different. Older." Ethan nodded. "Let's see if we can get power running. We might find something useful." As they worked, Cale managed to bring a few panels to life. Old data flashed across the screens, research logs, cargo manifests, and encrypted messages. One file stood out. It bore the same insignia as the one Ethan had seen on the children's shuttle, the crest of the Valari High Command. He opened it, and a holographic image flickered to life. A tall Valari man appeared, his uniform sharp, his expression cold. Ethan recognized him immediately, the same face he had seen in war reports years ago. "Admiral Kareth," Ethan muttered. Cale looked up. "You know him?" Ethan nodded grimly. "He led the fleet that destroyed the station Liara was posted at. He was the one who called her a traitor for helping humans." The hologram continued to play. Kareth's voice was calm, but every word carried a tone of authority and menace. "The hybrid experiment continues as ordered. Subject L01 remains under containment. The twins have been secured and transported through the gate network. Once recovery is complete, we will retrieve them and terminate all witnesses." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Subject L01, he whispered. "That's Liara." Cale's eyes widened. "They still have her?" Ethan shut down the hologram. "Yes, and now they know we're here." Before he could say more, the ship's alarm blared through the comlink. Myra's voice came through, panicked. "Dad! Ships! There are ships coming out of the gate." Ethan and Cale ran back toward the scout ship. Above the moon, lights began to appear. 3 Valari cruisers, sleek and silver, their weapons glowing. Ethan felt the ground shake as one of the ships fired a warning shot near their landing site. "They tracked us," he said through gritted teeth. "Get on board." Inside, Mira had already powered the engines. The twins strapped in while Ethan took the pilot's seat. "Hold on," he said. The ship lifted off just as the first volley hit the surface below. The explosion threw dust and debris into the sky. The Valari cruisers closed in fast. Ethan weaved through the moon's canyons, trying to lose them. Cale took over the rear controls, activating the ship's limited defense systems. Energy blasts streaked past them, some striking the hull and shaking the cabin. "They're too fast," Mira cried. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Not if we use the terrain." "Cale, rear out power to the front thrusters." Cale nodded, his hands moving quickly over the controls. The ship surged forward, scraping along the canyon walls. The Valari ships followed, firing relentlessly. Just when it seemed they were trapped, Ethan spotted a narrow tunnel ahead, barely wide enough for their ship. "Hang on!" he shouted. They dove into the tunnel, sparks flying as the hull scraped against stone. The enemy ships tried to follow, but the tunnel was too tight. One crashed against the wall, exploding in a flash of light. The others pulled back. When they finally emerged on the other side, Ethan pushed the engines to their limit, heading toward open space. The cruisers were still behind them but losing ground. He checked the scanners and saw something. A faint beacon ahead, transmitting an old Valari frequency. "Could that be her?" Mira asked. Ethan stared at the signal. "It's possible." He changed course, heading straight for it. Behind them, the enemy ships regrouped and followed. As they drew closer to the beacon, a massive shadow began to form in the distance. A space station hidden among asteroids, half buried, its lights flickering weakly. Cale's voice was barely a whisper. "That's where Mom is, isn't it?" Ethan looked at him and nodded. "Yes, and we're going to bring her home." The cruisers opened fire again, and the scout ship shook under the impact. But this time, Ethan didn't run. He flew straight toward the station, ready for whatever waited inside. The time for hiding was over. The scout ship approached the station slowly, the glow of its damaged engines casting faint light across the shattered hull. The structure floated between two large asteroids, its outer walls scarred by battle and time. Once it might have been a proud Valari research base, but now it looked abandoned, silent, dark, and forgotten. Yet, as they drew closer, faint lights began to flicker to life, as if the station itself had sensed their arrival. Ethan guided the ship toward a docking port that still seemed functional. The landing was rough, but they made it. He switched off the engines and sat for a moment, listening to the hum fade. Kale and Mira looked at him, nervous but determined. They all knew this was it. Somewhere inside that silent structure was the truth about Liara. "Stay close," Ethan said as he pulled on his gear. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." The airlock opened with a hiss. Beyond it, the corridors were cold and dim, their walls covered in strange Valari writing. Dust floated through the air, disturbed by their steps. Emergency lights blinked faintly every few meters, guiding them deeper into the station. Kale held a small scanner, following a signal that matched the one they had detected. "It's coming from the lower section," he said. "Deep underground." They moved carefully through the halls. Broken panels and fallen cables showed signs of a battle long ago. Ethan noticed scorch marks and fragments of weapons, human and Valari both. This place had seen fighting, maybe even an attempt to destroy it. But something had survived. They reached a large chamber with a central control console. Ethan powered it up using the ship's auxiliary pack. The console flickered to life, showing ancient data logs. Most were corrupted, but one file stood out, marked with Liara's personal code. Ethan hesitated, then opened it. A holographic image appeared. It was Liara, her soft blue skin and gentle eyes still as he remembered. Her voice was calm but filled with urgency. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then the station is no longer under my control. The Valari High Command ordered this place sealed after they discovered the truth about our research. We were trying to create peace, not weapons. But they feared what we built, what we became. Ethan, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. They took me to the lower labs. Our children. They are the key. Protect them." The image faded, leaving silence. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. She had been here, alive, working to stop the war, and the Valari had betrayed her. Kale stepped closer. "She knew about us," he said quietly. "She did," Ethan replied. "And she tried to protect you." Before they could continue, the console beeped. Another signal appeared, movement in the lower levels. Ethan checked the scanners. "Someone's still down there," he said. "Or something." They followed the narrow stairs downward, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder, and the hum of machinery echoed faintly. At the bottom, they found a reinforced door sealed with Valari symbols. Kale tried the controls, but they didn't respond. Ethan stepped forward, studying the mechanisms. "Stand back." He pulled out his plasma cutter and began slicing through the lock. Sparks flew, and the metal hissed as it melted. Finally, with a loud crack, the door gave way. Inside, the room was vast and filled with strange equipment. Tanks of shimmering liquid, suspended cables, and machines still running after all these years. In the center was a large containment pod, covered in frost. Ethan's heart pounded as he wiped away the ice. Inside was Liara. She looked unchanged, as if frozen in time. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. A faint blue light pulsed across her skin. Kale gasped. "Mom!" Ethan pressed a hand against the glass. "She's alive," he whispered. "Barely." The systems around them began to react to their presence. Screens lit up, and an automated voice spoke in Valari. Kale translated. "Unauthorized access detected. Security activation in progress." Ethan turned. "We have to get her out of here now." He searched the console beside the pod and found the release controls. "Kale, reroute the power. Mira, help me stabilize her when this opens." They worked quickly, hands moving in rhythm despite the chaos. The pod hissed as it opened, releasing a cloud of cold mist. Liara's body shifted slightly, her breathing deepening. Ethan caught her as she fell forward, her weight light in his arms. She was weak but alive. Then the alarm blared. Red lights flashed through the room. Mira looked up at the screens. Dad's ships are approaching. Valari cruisers again. Ethan's mind raced. We're out of time. He turned to Kale. Grab what you can from the computers. Anything with her research. We can't let it fall back into their hands. Kale nodded and pulled the data cores from the console. The ground shook as explosions echoed above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ethan carried Liara toward the exit, his heart pounding. Come on. Move. They raced up the stairs as the station's power flickered. The docking bay loomed ahead, their ship still waiting. Mira opened the hatch as they ran aboard. Kale jumped in behind them, clutching the data cores. As soon as they lifted off, the entire station began to collapse. Fire and debris filled the void behind them. Ethan looked back at the burning structure where they had found her, then down at Liara resting in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open for the first time in years. Ethan, she whispered weakly. He smiled through tears. I've got you. You're home now. But before they could celebrate, the scanners lit up again. More ships closing in fast. The Valari weren't done. The battle wasn't over. The scout ship shook as another explosion echoed behind them. Ethan held the controls steady, guiding the ship through the wreckage of the collapsing station. Fire and debris filled the void, scattering across the stars. Behind them, the Valari cruisers emerged from hyperspace. 3 massive warships, their silver hulls gleaming under the light of distant suns. Kale checked the scanners. They're closing in fast. We won't outrun them in this condition. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then we'll have to fight. Myra's voice trembled. Dad, our weapons can't handle ships that size. Ethan glanced at Liara, who lay on a stretcher near the back of the cockpit. She was awake now, her skin faintly glowing with the energy of her species. Her voice was weak but steady. There's another way, she said. The data Kale recovered, it includes a failsafe system. This station was part of an ancient network. If we can access one of the relay beacons nearby, we can trigger a surge that will disable any Valari ships within range. Ethan looked at her. You're saying there's a weapon hidden in this sector? Not a weapon, Liara said softly. A defense field created by my people long ago. But it needs power. More than your ship has. Kale frowned. Then how do we activate it? Liara looked toward the viewport. We use the Valari's own energy against them. Ethan nodded slowly. All right, show me where this beacon is. Liara pointed at the star chart Kale projected. A faint signal pulsed near a small moon surrounded by debris, an old Valari defense post. Ethan adjusted the course, pushing the engines to their limit. The ship trembled as they raced toward the coordinates, the enemy still in pursuit. The first cruiser fired. A blast of energy ripped past them, grazing the hull and shaking the cabin. Sparks flew from the panels. Mira struggled to keep her balance as she manned the auxiliary systems. Shields down to 30%. Ethan shouted over the noise. Kale, rear out power to forward shields. Keep us alive long enough to reach that beacon. Kale obeyed quickly. Done. But it's draining the reactor fast. They broke through a field of asteroids, weaving between spinning rocks and shattered metal. The Valari cruisers followed, firing continuously. Ethan's hands moved with precision, guiding the ship through narrow gaps where the larger vessels couldn't follow easily. One cruiser clipped an asteroid and spun away, leaving 2 still in pursuit. Ahead, the old defense post appeared, small and circular, glowing faintly with blue light. There, Liara said. That's the beacon. Ethan brought the ship in fast, skidding along the surface. Kale, Mira, get the power couplings ready. They landed hard, shaking the entire hull. Ethan and Kale jumped out with cables and power cells, running toward the beacon's base. The structure was ancient, half buried in dust, but still pulsing with a low hum. Liara's voice came through the comms. You need to connect your ship's reactor to the central node. I'll handle the activation from here. Ethan worked fast, attaching the cables while Kale stabilized the link. The air around them began to shimmer as the beacon came alive. Symbols glowed across its surface, lighting up one by one. Back on the ship, Mira monitored the energy levels. Dad, the reactor's hitting critical. We can't hold this for long. Liara's voice was calm. Just a little longer. The two remaining cruisers descended from orbit, their weapons charging. Ethan saw the light gather beneath their hulls. One more volley and they'd be vaporized. Liara now, he shouted. The beacon flared to life. A wave of blue energy rippled outward, spreading across space like a growing storm. It struck the Valari ship's mid-fire. For a moment, their lights flickered, then died. Their engines failed, their weapons dimmed, and they drifted helplessly in orbit. Kale stared in awe. It worked! Ethan looked up at the sky, still catching his breath. Yeah, but we're not safe yet. That surge will draw more ships soon. They ran back aboard the scout ship, disconnecting the cables as quickly as they could. Mira helped Liara to a seat, wrapping a blanket around her. Liara's breathing was slow, her energy nearly spent. That beacon was never meant to be used again, she said weakly. Its power comes from life energy. I gave some of mine to activate it. Ethan knelt beside her, worry in his eyes. You'll be all right. We're getting out of here. As they lifted off, the disabled Valari ships floated lifelessly below. The beacon's glow began to fade, its energy depleted. The small family watched in silence as the system slowly went dark. But before they could relax, a new blip appeared on the scanners. A massive warship, far larger than any before. Its silhouette filled the stars, its engines burning red. Kale's voice broke the silence. That's not just a cruiser. That's a dreadnought. Liara's expression hardened despite her weakness. Kareth, she said. He's come to finish what he started. Ethan's grip tightened on the controls. Then he's going to find out what it means to threaten my family. The dreadnought turned slowly toward them, its weapons charging. The final battle was about to begin. The Valari dreadnought loomed like a mountain of steel and fire, its crimson lights cutting through the darkness of space. Ethan's ship, battered and worn, looked tiny by comparison. The sensors screamed warnings as the massive warship powered up its main cannon. It was Admiral Kareth's flagship, the same man who had once declared Liara a traitor and torn their lives apart. Ethan tightened his grip on the controls. Kale, Mira, strap in. We're not running this time. Liara, still weak but conscious, reached toward him. Ethan, you can't fight that thing. It's too strong. He looked back at her with quiet resolve. I'm not fighting it alone. Kale was already at the engineering console. Dad, the reactor's unstable. If we push it any harder. Ethan interrupted, his tone firm. I know, but we're out of options. The dreadnought fired. A blinding beam of energy shot past them, grazing the ship's shields and sending it spinning. Ethan regained control, rolling hard to avoid the next blast. Alarms wailed across the cockpit. Mira cried out as sparks showered from an overloaded circuit. Liara closed her eyes, focusing. Her hands began to glow faintly blue. The beacon's power still lingers in this system, she whispered. If I can link with it again, even for a moment, I might amplify your reactor enough to give us one chance. Ethan turned to her sharply. That could kill you. She smiled weakly. It already almost did. But this will end it. Kale's eyes widened as he understood. You're going to overload the reactor with the beacon's frequency and release it through the ship's core. Liara nodded. Yes, it will create a burst of energy powerful enough to disable the dreadnought. But you must fire it at the right time. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to protect her, to stop this. But he saw the same determination in her eyes that had drawn him to her years ago. She wasn't afraid. She never had been. He swallowed hard. All right, let's end this together. Kale began rerouting systems while Mira synchronized the targeting array. The ship shook again as smaller Valari fighters launched from the dreadnought, swarming toward them. Ethan flew through the chaos, dodging plasma fire and returning shots where he could. The twins worked in perfect rhythm, Kale managing the power flows, Mira keeping them locked onto the dreadnought's reactor core. Liara placed her hands on the energy conduit beside her. A pulse of blue light spread through the ship's walls. The engines roared louder, glowing brighter than before. Ethan felt it through the controls. The ship was alive, responding to her. Power levels rising, Kale shouted. Reactor at 150%. Hold it steady, Ethan yelled back. Mira, target the dreadnought's central core. Locked, she cried. But it's charging its main cannon again. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we'll fire first. The dreadnought's massive cannon began to glow red, preparing to unleash its final strike. At that exact moment, Liara screamed. A burst of blue light flared through the cabin, surging into the reactor. The entire ship shook violently. Now, Ethan, she shouted. Ethan hit the trigger. A beam of blue-white energy burst from their ship, tearing across space and striking the dreadnought squarely in its core. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to vanish in the glare. The enemy ship convulsed, its lights flickering wildly before its entire hull erupted in a chain of explosions. The shockwave rolled through the void, scattering debris and vaporizing the fighters that had surrounded them. Silence followed. Ethan breathed heavily, his hands shaking on the controls. Status. Kale looked at the readings. The dreadnought's gone. Completely gone. Mira smiled faintly. We did it. Ethan turned toward Liara. She was slumped in her seat, her glow fading. He rushed to her side, taking her hand. Liara, stay with me. It's over. We're safe now. Her eyes opened slowly, soft and filled with peace. You kept your promise, she whispered. You found me. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. I'll never lose you again. She smiled weakly. You won't. I'll always be here. In them. Her gaze drifted toward the twins. Take care of them. They are the future of both our worlds. Her hand went still, the faint light in her skin dimming until it vanished completely. Ethan closed his eyes, grief and pride mixing in his heart. He kissed her forehead and whispered, Rest now. Hours later, the ship drifted quietly among the remains of the battle. Kale and Mira sat beside him in silence, watching the stars. The beacon's faint glow shimmered one last time in the distance, then faded forever. Mira leaned against him. What happens now, Dad? Ethan looked out at the endless stars. We go home. There's a lot to rebuild. But your mother gave us a chance. That's more than anyone could ask for. Kale nodded. She believed humans and Valari could live together. Ethan smiled faintly. Then that's what we'll make happen. The engines hummed softly as the ship turned toward the nearest star system. The war was over for now. But among the wreckage of the dreadnought and the echoes of sacrifice, hope was born again. As the stars stretched before them, Ethan held his children close, the promise of a new beginning shining in their eyes. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the universe, he could almost hear Liara's voice whisper, You found me.